This is our May solution session for CounterSketch. My name is Heather Kutzman and I am the Tech Support and Training Director at Gemvision. In today's webinar, we've got quite a few things that we're going to discuss. We have our Pinterest to price examples, which is where I find some trending styles on Pinterest, and we talk about how we can create those styles in CounterSketch so that we can be sure that we're providing kind of the most on-trend designs for our customers, and that it's really easy to kind of translate those images that are walking into your store into something that you can actually sell, even if maybe you don't have it in your showcase. Next, we're going to talk about curated collections. This is a feature that came out last year that allows you to merchandise the CounterSketch library to really focus in on the styles in the library that you feel are most relevant for your customer base. We did cover this in a previous webinar, but I think it's a really good feature that sometimes goes unnoticed or unused, and I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of it and really comfortable in using it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. Finally, we're going to finish up with our featured designs. We recently added quite a few new designs to the CounterSketch library. I want to make sure that we call those out, that you guys are aware of them, and that you're able to start using them and integrating them into your work in CounterSketch. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's go ahead and kick things off with our first segment, which again is our Pinterest to price segment. We're going to do something a little bit different with our first example, and we're actually going to look at creating some earrings. Now, there aren't earrings in the standing collection of CounterSketch. We focus primarily on rings and pendants, but that doesn't mean that they can't be created, and it also doesn't mean that a lot of times customers aren't inspired by an earring design to create something like a pendant or a ring. So I want to work through the steps of kind of creating something and then being able to use it in multiple different ways while you're working in CounterSketch. So we've got this piece. Again, these particular pieces are earrings. We're going to build them as earrings and then talk about how we might also use this design to make kind of a set with a matching ring or a matching pendant to go with it. You can see that this design is kind of, I don't know, like I may be stretching it to call granulation. You guys can call me out on that if you think I'm stretching it too far. But it also has a bezel set round center, and we've got these really neat open pear-shaped outlines in the design. So I feel like it's kind of an on-trend fun piece. We're also going to talk about kind of how you might do the manufacturing for this. Typically, we do not cast earring post onto the design as one piece, but it would be nice if we could kind of input a similar piece so that the customer could get an idea of what the finished model might look like. So again, ideally we would cast just the earring component, and then after manufacturing you could either ask Stellar's CAD/CAM services to add the post and just reference the specific post that you'd like to use, or your jeweler could add the post and you could order those separately. So there's a couple of different ways to do this, and we're going to talk about all of them. So let's hop over into CounterSketch. I'm going to expand my screen, just make it full screen so it's easy to see. And we're going to start working on this piece. Again, as I mentioned, there is nothing that is earring related already in CounterSketch, so we are going to need to build this entirely from freehand parts. For my first piece, I'm just going to add that bezel setting out there on the screen because that is kind of the central point of my piece and I want to have something to start from. Also, based on the size of this center stone and the overall size of the earring, that will kind of help us gauge the other components in our design. I'm going to make this fairly small, so maybe like a 3-point stone, because it's really intended to sit on the pad of your earlobe, and for most people that's not a lot of square footage, so we want to make it a little bit smaller. So here is our initial stone. Again, I'm just bringing it out, leaving it as is, and scaling it down to about a 3-point stone. From there, we need to add those decorative details around. So I'm going to go into wire, rope, and knot. And I'm just going to grab a really simple wire shape. When I add this out onto my screen, this is kind of the most difficult, I think, part of the design, and that's getting the scale right. And that's why I've turned on my grid, is because I have an idea in my head of how large I want this earring piece to be, and I want to make sure that everything stays proportional in my design. So I've got this jump ring out on my screen. If I look over here on the left side, I can change the shape of that jump ring to be just about anything that I want. In our case, we are looking for something that is a pear shape, and it's a little wide across the center, but that's a pretty good idea. We also want to think about the width and height of this metal. Again, this is an earring. We don't want it to be so heavy that it's kind of weighing down the earlobe. So we want to check in and make sure that we're not making it too wide or too thick. So I'm going to bring this down to about a 1.7. You can go even smaller than that if you want to. And I'm going to change the shape as well. So it's up to you. I kind of want to do something a little bit more decorative for this, but you can pick the shape, again, that you think is going to be best for your customer. I like something like this just because we can, and it'll make it a little bit unique again. So let's go in, and we need to make some adjustments to the overall size. Again, if I bring this up here and start to think about the overall scale, you'll remember if I look at this grid, each one of these is 5 millimeters. So right now, if I were to leave it as is, I think my earring would be about 26 millimeters across, because I'm going to have this on the other side. And in my mind, that's just a little bit too big for an earring. So again, we can come in here, especially a stud. It's, what did they say? It's only too big if it's on someone else's hand. But we're going to try and just bring this a little bit smaller, because we are attempting to build a stud earring that needs to sit on that little portion of our ear. So this is a little bit better. I'm going to bring this in. Again, this is going to be that conversation between you and your customer where you really talk about like how big it needs to be. Right now, again, because of my scaling down, it looks like I've got about almost like a little over 9 millimeters. If it's hard to see, you can always go into your top-down view. So we've got 5, a little over 9 millimeters. If we double that, we're looking at about 18, maybe 19 millimeters across. That's better, but again, check in with your customer, make sure that they agree that that's kind of the size that they're looking for. If it isn't, you can always come in and adjust the width and length again to update that. I'm going to stick here, so let's go ahead and repeat this pattern 4 times around our ring. I'm going to left click on that blue box until I get to my polar array option. Left click on polar array, and you can see that my polar array starts out where it's only covering 90 degrees of my angle. I want to left click and drag this around all the way to 360 so that my design covers the entire circumference of my piece. From there, I want to make sure that my count is set to 4, because we only need 4 of these almost they look kind of like petals or pear-shaped pieces around our design. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to left click on my blue box again, and if I need to, I can go in at this point and like bring things a little bit closer together. If I wanted to make my center stone smaller so that I could have really good connection between these pieces, I can. I'm going to go back to my reference image, and I can see that these guys aren't necessarily touching perfectly. It's more these circles on the outside that are kind of holding everything together. So I feel like this is a pretty good representation. So let's head back and talk about adding those circles. I also may want to at this point go into a perspective view, take a look around, again making sure that everything looks approximately the right height and it's all sitting together nicely. I'm happy with that. So let's go back into our freehand parts, look under our shapes, and we are going to look for just a sphere. If we scroll down through our different components, we will find one. And when it comes out, it's a fairly good size. So I like to work in my top-down view for a lot of things like this. I can always kind of drag this to the right and to the left, but I really like to be able to do it evenly. So I'm going to drag it up and then over to the right. That's obviously too big, so I'm going to use my 3-dimensional scaling handle to scale it down. And then let's zoom in and kind of take a closer look. And that looks pretty good. I might can move it down a little bit more here, but that's decent placement. Let's go back into perspective and check it out from another angle. It might can move up just a little bit. And I also think that I want to get a little bit more overlap between these. So again, we'll move it in and over to get that lined up. Once we have one of these in place, we can use our quad mirror to mirror that sphere to all 4 sides of our design. And we've got a good start for this next step. Rather than bring out a new sphere every time, I think it's going to be easier for me to come in and simply duplicate the selected item. So again, I'm left clicking on that little menu option and I'm choosing the 3rd option in, which is to duplicate selected. That just creates an exact copy of whatever I was working with before. It drops it exactly on top of the initial object, so in order to see it on my screen, I am going to need to create some separation between those 2 pieces. Once I do this, I know from my kind of general concept that I need to scale this piece down, so it's a good bit smaller than that initial sphere, and we'll just nicely kind of tuck it in here on the side. Again, good start. We've got 4 of them going on. Let's now take this piece and duplicate it so that we're sure that we have the same size sphere when we go to place the other one. And for this, I'm just dragging it straight down initially, and then we can move it a little bit to the left or to the right to kind of place it perfectly. And then we'll do that one more time. Duplicate this sphere, and then drag it over to the right. Again, we may have to bring this one up just a little bit and out a little bit more. And that looks pretty good. So that gives us our general earring. We've got everything pulled together. I'm pretty happy with the placement of all of these pieces. And now it's time to think about our actual earring post. So we've designed all of our components. We just need to add our earring post to this, but I have no idea how large an earring post is. So I'm going to reference something, and it can be whatever you like. So typically when I'm looking for findings, I always go to the Stellar website, and you can do that same thing if you want. So I'm going to go to stellar.com. I've logged in and I want to look under findings, and specifically I'm looking for earring components. So I'm just looking for something that I can reference for a post size to get an idea of how large of a post I need to put on my piece. Again, this is a great opportunity for you to kind of pick a post that you would like to work with. I'm going to select this one here. And if you look in the Stellar website and kind of scroll further towards the bottom of the screen, it will actually give you the exact dimensions of that piece. So if I come down here, I can see that the post thickness is 0.036 inches and the post length is 0.44 inches. I am not that great at math, so I always go and try to convert inches to millimeters. So right here. So for example, if I saw that this post is 0.44 inches long, I'm going to type that in here, and that means that it should be a little over 11 millimeters long. So if we head back into CounterSketch now, I want to go in and find a piece that I can use as a post. So I'm going to look under wire, rope, and knot. Come in here and just grab a straight piece of wire and add it out onto my screen. I'm going to go into perspective this time just to make it a little bit easier to work with this. I want to rotate that piece of wire that I'm going to use as my post until it's standing straight up, and then I'm going to drag it down so that it's approximately in the right location. We're going to make a lot of changes to it, so it doesn't have to be perfect to start. I also know that I want to change my profile shape to be something round because that's traditionally what earring posts are. And we're going to adjust our length until we get to that just a little over 11. I may need to expand my control range to get there. That's okay. Just come in here and we want to do, I think it was 11.17. Look at that, perfect. All right, so we've got that post. We're going to drag it down until the top of the post is kind of approximately at the back of that setting for our earring. And that gives us the length for that post. Next step is to check our width. Again, I'm going to go back to my website, reference the thickness that is shown here, which is 0.036 inches. I'm going to convert that to millimeters, and it's 0.91 millimeters. So again, heading back into CounterSketch, we just want to change the profile width and height. So we want to take it both directions to that 0.91. 0.9 is close enough for me to show my customer, so I'm not going to worry about that 0.91. And that looks pretty good. So I've spent all this time doing or getting Google to do all this math for me, and I'd like to save this post so that if I want to use it again, I don't have to go through that process. So I want to create a user part for this post. I'm just going to come in here, choose again from this menu option, that second to last option, which is export to user parts. It asked me for a name for this part, and so that I know what finding I would like Stellar to use or to order myself, I'm going to actually go back into the website and use this number right here, which is 29241. So I'm just going to grab this number and add it. Let's see, we're going to go Control C and Control V. So submit. And now if I ever need this earring post again, I can go into my user parts and there it is. And I know that this piece is scaled to be approximately the same size as that finding from Stellar. So I know if, again, this is a good length, then this is the right one for my customer. So again, it gives me that visual idea of what that finished piece is going to look like. So this is how we would build the earrings. When we go into the order screen, we would just request that we get 2 of these created rather than 1, which means when you do your pricing estimate, you want to double whatever you see because we're going to create 2 of these, not just 1, so we have 2 earrings. Again, typically we're not going to cast this post, so you may want to, after you get approval from your customer, just hide this earring post component, have them cast like this, and then either request that CAD/CAM add that post to the design, or again, you can add them yourself once the mountings come in. Again, I'm sure you guys can imagine how you might be able to take this into a pendant. So all we have to do is go into our bales, select a bale that we think is in line with the style of our design, and then scale it to fit appropriately with our piece. So maybe I'll scale this guy down a little bit. And now we've made a matching pendant to go with our earrings. We talked about scale for the earrings, so you might need to come in and make everything larger for a pendant. So that's something to keep in mind when you think about creating collections of pieces. But again, you can definitely start by using the pieces that you already have. We just need to go in and maybe make everything a little bit larger. And take a look at our next design. I thought this was kind of a fun design. It could be an engagement ring if you put a diamond in the center. It could also be a birthstone ring. I know we have a lot of graduations happening right now. Or it could be, even just a fashion ring or something fun to wear. But I really liked this model. I picked it, and then I realized that it actually utilized one of our new designs, or our new featured designs, and I was super excited about that possibility. So let's go ahead and hop over into CounterSketch, and we'll look at how we can take one of our new featured designs to actually build out this style. This style right here, so 72185, is very similar to that style that we saw. There is a little bit of variation with the prong placement on the side, but I don't know that it's enough to justify completely building with freehand parts. So I thought we would use this one as our starting point. And again, we're going to have to add some more pieces to it, but it's a great way to think about taking existing library pieces and then incorporating those into a design so you don't have to do as much building. With those earrings we just built, we had to do absolutely every single part and piece. With this one, we're not going to have to do as much work in freehand. So if you want, you can turn your grid off. Scale is kind of set by the size of the piece here, but if you like the grid, you can definitely leave it on. Again, if we look at our image, there is a full bezel around the center stone rather than a half. So I want to come over here to my design options and just change that to be our full bezel rather than a half bezel, and it's going to update to reflect that change. We can also set the center stone size just based on the image. I think it's a little bit larger, maybe more like a half a carat than a quarter carat. And I also think that these accent stones on the side are a little bit larger. So I want to go into my advanced customization options. I want to look at my accents on the side, and I'm just going to left click and drag this slider to the right to make those guys a little bit larger. Alright, so that gives us, if you take a look, the majority of this center portion of our design. So the only thing we have left to do is to come back and add these 3 stone clusters at the top and bottom. Again, the prong arrangement here is a little bit different from the prong arrangement in our model. We've got a couple more prongs kind of helping us out, but again, I don't think it's enough of a difference to make it worth building. If it is, then you can definitely kind of add the components together, but I love it when we can go ahead and use something that's already existing. So let's go in to our freehand library, left click on our settings category, and come down to our 3 prong setting. And we want to left click to start designing. I want to start with my top center stone, and then I'll add the 2 other stones underneath it. So that just makes it a little bit easier. Again, if at this point we want to go back and reference our image, you can see that if we only have 3 prongs, we've got one at the very point, and then two kind of at, it would be not like, this would be 3, so maybe 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, not in between those two. So let's come back in here. Our stone is really large. If we wanted to, we could maybe reference the stone size for this existing larger accent gem. So I'm going to left click on my stone report up here in the right and just take a look to find out what size those accent gems are. Those are 1.75 millimeters, and maybe I want to use that same stone size, so we're just going to decrease the size over here. It takes us down to 2 millimeters. I can actually left click in these boxes and type the exact dimensions of what I want to use. So I'm going to do that in this case and just type in that 1.75. There we go. So now we have that same stone size. I'm going to left click and drag this up, and then we'll drag it out. And if we look at this from a top-down view, you can see that all of my prongs are kind of in the wrong place. I can come in here and start to rotate things, but it gets a little messy when I do that. So I always like to look over here on the left side, and I do have in my design stack the ability to rotate the gem using a slider, which honestly is more my comfort zone. So that's what I'm going to choose to do. So I'm just left clicking, dragging it to the right, and about a 30-degree rotation, and again, this is where you can add that grid back if it helps. About a 30-degree rotation seems to line up that top prong in the very center, which is what I would like to do. So that looks pretty good. I may need to move it out a little bit. We'll know better once we add those other gems. But let's mirror this gem across the top already just to get us started. So we've got one gem hanging out there, and now I want to take a closer look at my setting style. So if I look at the settings that are over here on the sides, you can see that they have a solid rail, a solid single rail going all the way through. To help make these pieces that we're adding look as integrated into the design as possible, I'm going to try to mimic that style with these settings that I'm adding. So again, we can start to look at our options here. I may completely remove that upper gallery rail so that we just have one. And then I'm also going to make that lower gallery rail a lot taller. So for my lower gallery rail, the setting rail height, I'm just going to left click and drag it to the right, and you can start to see that this looks a lot more like these others that we are referencing. The shape isn't perfect. Again, we're looking at this kind of under a microscope, so don't be too intimidated if it's not the exact profile shape. But if we can get those kind of in the same vein, I think that we'll be much happier with our design in the end. So again, that's a good start. If we want to look at this in our through finger view, again, we may want to line this up so that it's just matching the bottom of our piece. And then again, we can choose our height, right? So do we want these clusters to be approximately the same height as the side clusters? If so, we may want to increase our height just a teeny bit. But again, you can kind of play with these and decide what is going to be best. I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to leave it right there. Now that we've got this setting correctly kind of configured to match the other settings in our design, we're going to go in and do that same thing that we did with the circles in the last example, and we're just going to duplicate that setting. That way we don't have to go through the process of changing the stone size and changing the setting arrangement. Everything is just going to copy over from that initial piece, and it's going to be a lot easier to position these. Again, if it's helpful, go into your top-down view and then use your arrow keys to kind of place, or not your arrow keys, use your viewport control handles to reposition these stones. It looks like things are a little tight in that space, so if at this point I need to move that top gem out, I can definitely do that so that I have a little bit more space for these other gems. I'm also going to do a quad mirror rather than just a top mirror because I need the 3 that are going to be in this cluster. And there we go. So this looks decent. Let's go back to our reference image again. We've got where these prongs are coming together. I could move these prongs closer into my bezel just to change their arrangement. And with this setting, we actually have the freedom to do that. So if you take a look here at this prong, we'll scroll all the way to the bottom of our design stack, and it'll probably take me a minute to figure out which one is which, but we want to just move these prongs around. Again, make sure you've got a little bit of daylight between these stones so that your jeweler can set them and we're not worried about girdles kind of overlapping one another. But I want to move these prongs out here on the side so that they're closer in to my bezel. And I can do that by choosing to rotate my prongs around my head. I've got 3 different prongs. Unfortunately, they're not labeled on my screen for me to see. So I'm going to look and see that this one's currently set to 15 and just drag it to the right and see what happens. Okay, so I moved that top prong. That's not what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to take this guy back to 15 because I was happy with its placement before. Now let's do the same thing. We'll try the prong 2 is at -15. Let's go to -26. Nope, wrong one. 3rd time's the charm. So we'll drag this back. And then finally we'll come down here, grab the correct prong, and we'll rotate it around our head. There we go. So we just again are aligning those prongs so that everything sits nicely. If you take a look at our reference image, there's also a large prong right here in the center of all 3 of these. We've got time, so we're going to add that prong too. Again, we'll go back into our freehand parts menu, choose a piece of wire rope and knot. That same piece of wire that we used to create our earring post, we're going to use to create a prong. We just want to make this kind of a short round prong, again to kind of live right there in the center of those 3 cluster stones. I'm going to go ahead and change the profile shape to be round because I want it to look like my other round prongs. We want to rotate this so that it is vertical and can be placed with our gems. And I'm going to drag it forward. If you want, there's 2 ways you can do this. I may get my placement correct first and my size and then adjust my length. But either way will work. So right now it's still really large, so I want to decrease my profile width. Let's try going all the way to the left. That's a little bit too small, so maybe 0.7, and that looks like a pretty good size. Again, we're going to move this down so that it's getting nice contact with all 3 of those cluster stones. And now it's time to go in and adjust the length because that is way too big of a prong. So come in here to our length percentage, make it shorter, and at 1.5, let's drag it down. Again, we want to, as much as we can, mimic the placement of these other prongs, and it's not quite long enough. So again, go into your length, make it a little bit longer, and maybe drag your placement down. If this is hard to see this way, you can always go into a side view, and that will help you to line up the top and bottom of that prong. And that looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to leave it there. We just now need to mirror this prong over to the other side. So we're going to top mirror that, and we've got our design created. So again, we're just adding to an existing library model to create that additional cluster. We used a 3-prong setting for those clusters, but then we came back and added that central prong so that we would have a little bit more support and also a little bit more secure setting that more closely reflects our inspiration design. So again, the curated collections are a feature that we added last year. I think it is a very cool feature that allows you to really merchandise the CounterSketch library. I think we have over 1,300 ring styles in the library, which is a lot for most customers to take in. And while you have filters and things like that that you can use to find the style that's most appropriate for the customer that you're working with, I feel like sometimes there are almost like area favorites. So things that you sell fairly often that would be nice if you could just reference really quickly and easily, or maybe, after looking at the trends for this season, you pick a couple of designs that you feel like are really in line with what you feel is going to be popular in your area for the summer. Once you've selected those designs, we can create a tile on your start screen that kind of references and calls those styles out, and it'll make it easier for your salespeople to find what they're looking for quickly. So let's head back into CounterSketch. And before we can create a tile and all of those things, we need to select some styles that we want to have in our collection. To do this, I typically will go to all ring designs, and then I can either go through and just search through all 1,300 models and check the ones that I want to have in my collection, or I can start to apply filters to find what is most relevant. So maybe I know that I want to find styles that are halos, and I want the center stone to definitely be prong set. And from there, I'll take a look and see how many results I have left over. So prong set halos, there are, it's still updating, there we go, 130. And that's a pretty good group to choose from. So if I want, I can just start searching through this collection. And I'm trying to really maybe call out more of this Nouveau halo. So it's a halo, but it has something a little bit different than that traditional full round diamond outline. It's something a little bit unusual, either in the halo shape or the stone shape that's in the halo. And so I just want to look through these designs and select the designs that are part of that, what I'm calling a Nouveau halo look. So let's go through these. Again, I'm just left clicking on that little box in the lower left corner of the design preview image. And as I'm doing that, you'll notice that I've got this little, we call it a session pick tray at the bottom center of my screen. And so if I left click on these little dots here, you will see that we've selected 8 styles for our Nouveau Halo collection, and we've also got that indicator here. If after doing this I feel like there are some that maybe don't belong, I can left click here to remove these styles from my collection. But once I'm happy with the ones I've selected, I have the ability to add these marked designs to a portfolio, which is what I want to do. So I'm going to click on that button. It adds them to my current portfolio. I'm going to open up my design manager, and you can see in this new portfolio I have all 8 of those designs that we selected. I want to rename this portfolio, so I'm just going to right click on that and click rename, and I'm going to call these, can anyone spell Nouveau? N-E-V-E. Nope, I have not had coffee this morning. We'll call them New Halos. Alright, so we've created our new Halo portfolio, and we're just going to rename it. So there's our new Halos. And now I want to create that tile. So let's head back to our home screen. And this is where we can either click down here on this little gear in the lower left corner, or we can come into our CounterSketch start menu, look under preferences, and we want to customize our start screen. So either way will work and take you to this screen. This is where we have to start making some decisions. So we are going to add a new tile. Our screen currently is completely full, and so we can either minimize some of the existing tiles, or we can remove an existing tile to make space for our new tile. Either one will work. It's entirely up to you. If you remove a tile from your start screen, you are not removing those designs from your library. The only thing that you're doing is just making it a little bit more difficult to find those styles grouped by that specific category. So the anniversary rings will still show up in all ring designs and most likely wedding bands, but you won't be able to go directly to the anniversary rings if you take off this tile. You can also always add them back. So we're not getting rid of anything permanently. If we do remove them, we would just click on that little trash can icon and they would go away. For me, I'm going to maybe adjust the size. So if I come in here and left click on this little box just to the left of the trash can, you'll see that we have different tile sizes to choose from. Currently this one is set to a wide tile, so I'm just going to change it to be a medium tile. My graphics and everything shift and update to reflect that change, and now I've got a little space to add my custom tile. I'd like to do a wide tile, so I'm going to do the same thing here to my wedding bands so that those two are a little bit smaller, and I've got place for a wide tile for my curated collection. To make that space a little bit closer together, I can just left click and drag this tile over here so that those two are sharing a space, and now I've got an opening for my new custom tile. So we've got the space, we've kind of cleared out some stuff, and now we're going to add a new custom tile. Down here in the lower right, it adds, so I just clicked on that add new custom tile. It drops it out on our screen, and then we can come down and make it a wide tile rather than that large square. We've got the tile, it's the right size, but it's in the wrong location. So again, we're just going to left click and drag this tile over to that opening that we created. If I want this tile to live up here at the top, again, I'm just going to left click and drag and kind of move it around to where I think it should live. So we've got our new tile, it's the right size, but we don't have an image and it's not linked to anything. Again, we're trying to create a link to that creation or that new Halo styles that we just kind of separated and merchandised for ourselves. So we're going to left click on this link option, and it's asking us what we want this tile to link to. There's all types of different things that you can link a tile to. In our case, we want to link to a CounterSketch portfolio. We're going to come in here and tell it that we want to link to those new halos. So let's look in here. New halos right there. And it doesn't necessarily have to have the same name. So it's going to default to new halos. But if I want to call this Summer 2021, I can. So again, it's going to default to use the name that you name the portfolio, but you can always change it. And then I'm just going to left click on Submit. So it's hard to see, but under that where it says Add Photo, this says Summer 2021, and this tile is now linked to that collection. We'll take a look at exactly what that means in just a moment. But I'd also like to add a photo. So while it's nice to have, that option where I can click there, I've just got a blank tile right now. So if I click on Add Photo, it will allow me to add an image to this particular tile. So I want to browse. If I click on this browse button, by default it takes me to all of the images that are part of the CounterSketch interface already. So we've got some stock images here for you to choose from. A lot of these are already being used in CounterSketch, so you don't have to use them, but you can. I'm going to go into my picture files, and I actually have a really great render of a similar style. So I'm just going to left click on that and click open. It adds it out there, but it's severely distorted, right? Because I have a wide tile and kind of a square image. So just under here, you can decide how it's going to fill in that image. So do we want it to fill? Do we want it to be uniform? Do we want it to be uniform to fill? Kind of a bunch of options to choose from. I'm just going to choose uniform. Again, if at this point you go, I really need a different render and a different resolution to be more rectangular, you can always go back and do that. For me, I think we'll stick with this because I like just a little bit of a reference image there. So we'll click on Save. So now we've got that image saved with our tile. I'm going to left click on Save Tiles, and now this is my new start screen. The tiles that we resized and shifted are over here, and the tile that we created has that new image, new title, and when I left click on that tile, it shows me those 8 designs that we selected and put in that portfolio. So it's really easy for me to come in and select from one of these styles to begin a design. Again, that's how we walk through the process of creating a curated collection. These are the new styles that were recently added to the library, in addition to the one that we used for our second Pinterest to price example. So definitely check out these new styles that were added. If you didn't get these new styles, you may need to update your CounterSketch your CounterSketch submission. And so please definitely do that. Somebody loves, it looks like Jessica loves this one, the 3/6, this guy here. It is super cool. I like this one too, Jessica, with the little pear shape on the side. It's kind of a neat, fun, pretty one. So definitely check these out the next time you're designing in CounterSketch. As a reminder, anytime we have new announcements about software or even just specific jewelers that we're highlighting that are using Gemvision software, we share that information on our social media. So wherever you prefer to participate in social media, maybe it's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, please join us on social media. We are Gemvision Corp in all of those locations, so be sure to check us out. As a reminder, we do have a recording of today's webinar. To view that webinar, you just need to go to stellar.com/webinars, and you'll see the May solution session with CounterSketch listed. I do have to do some post-event editing this afternoon, but it should be up on that page by Monday of next week. So definitely check us out at that time. see what else we have today. As a reminder, so if you or another member of your staff is interested in participating in a Gemvision CounterSketch training in 2021, our classes are filling up quickly. So please, if you're interested, take advantage of one of these 3 remaining dates. We have 2 on-site CounterSketch trainings in Lafayette, and we have 1 virtual CounterSketch training that's going to be in October. The virtual training is great because you don't have to travel, but the on-site training is great because you get to benefit from all of the amazing hospitality down in Lafayette. So there isn't a right choice, but picking one of these would definitely be a good way to finish out 2021 as we start to prepare for holiday. We have another webinar coming up in June. So on Thursday, June 24th at 9 a.m. Central, we're going to have our June solution session. To sign up for that June solution session, you just go to the same place that you do to view the recording, which is www.stellar.com/webinars. We're going to talk about some popular versatile classics on that webinar, in addition to our Pinterest to price examples and our featured designs. If you have questions outside of our time together, always feel free to reach out to our technical support team at countersketch@gemvision.com. They're available and happy to help with any questions that you may have. So again, please don't hesitate to reach out to them if you have questions. Thank you all so much for your time this morning. Again, we know that your time away from the sales floor and your customers is valuable, so we hope that you were able to glean some valuable tidbits or tips and tricks from the webinar this morning. Thank you all so much for your time again. We really appreciate it, and we will look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.